In the early 1980s, Doctor Who had a hit with Earthshock, which featured the return of the Cybermen after several years. So, as with a lot of these kinds of things, everybody decided to try and make lightning strike twice, with Warriors of the Deep. This featured the kind of reptilian team-up that fans of Godzilla should be familiar with. Basically, the Silurians and the Sea Devils from the 1970s returned. It can't have escaped anybody's notice that the best way of portraying aliens is to have the actors' eyes and mouth visible, as with the Sontarans, the Draconians and the Zygons. Unfortunately, the Silurians have very static faces, and this combined with their flashing light third eye and their somewhat monotone voices makes them look kind of bionic, as though they're halfway to being Cybermen. The Sea Devils have samurai-like costumes which are actually a vast improvement over their string vests. Unfortunately, the actor's head seems to be in the neck of the Sea Devil, which becomes very obvious at certain points. Or maybe he's just seen something interesting. At the beginning of this story, we find the undersea base, inhabited by the human beings, contains a kind of gas which is lethal to reptile and marine life. And the villains are reptilian and one lot is marine. Throughout this story, the Doctor is constantly reminding the human beings that the reptile people deserve respect, but the story never gives us any reason as to why we should. He refers to them as a race of peaceful mediators, and at one point a Silurian reminds him that they offered the hand of friendship to the human beings once before. The actual fact is that in the original Silurian story, only one of the Silurians we ever meet wanted to be friends with the humans. He is murdered by his colleagues, who then set about trying to wipe out the human race with a virus. Not only this, but the Doctor thinks the best way of showing the base is friendly is by giving one of the guards a good smacking, and then almost causing a nuclear reactor disaster. Makes you wonder if he's been sniffing the gas himself, really. The saving grace of this story is Peter Davison, who is arguably one of the best actors to ever play the Doctor. No matter what silly, ridiculous situations he's in, he makes them seem real, or at least as real as possible under the circumstances. For example, he manages to keep a straight face and take it seriously when he sees a green pantomime horse demolishing bulkhead doors which are so obviously made of polystyrene, and also he must take credit for managing to make convincing a scene where he is asked to make it look like a polystyrene door is actually very heavy. And then there's the Merker, which we're told is a powerful underwater creature which has some kind of bionic upgrade. It's a green pantomime horse. It was even played by the two men who played the pantomime horse in Rent-A-Ghost. Not only that, but due to a rushed production, the paint on it wasn't dry. It leaves green splurges everywhere, and at one point it splashes on Tegan's dress. Get your mind out of the sewer! As I was saying, the glue wasn't dry yet, and one of the operators inside the costume actually started hallucinating at one point, so I'm told. There is a scene in which Ingrid Pitt, who used to be in a lot of Hammer horror movies, has a karate fight with the Merker.
Everybody was kung fu fighting.
He must have wondered where it all went wrong. Another problem with the rushed production was the fact that there was no time to set up lights for the adventure, so they were forced to just use the studio lights. As a result, everything is floodlit, and we're never really giving them the impression that we're underwater. It could easily have been on the moon or the North Pole. And the reptile people are more or less just Cybermen in different costumes, despite the occasional attempts at making them seem more emotional. At the beginning of this story, the TARDIS is hovering above the Earth, and it's accosted by a robotic satellite which threatens to destroy it. So what, the TARDIS is just an ordinary spaceship now? One interesting little detail of the plot is that information and personalities can be stored on disks and downloaded into human beings via bionic implants. They can also be corrupted, which means that the spies manage to take control of the person that they've downloaded stuff into, and this would actually have made a good Doctor Who story itself. Instead it all just gets forgotten, all the big reptiles stamping about. What was really needed was an interesting story in which the Doctor manages to mediate between the human beings and the Silurians and Sea Devils. Instead of that, it just feels like a Hollywood blockbuster no-brainer, but without any decent special effects. If you want to see the Silurians, then stick with the original. And if you want a base under siege story, then probably your best shot are things like Earthshock or Seeds of Death, or Ark in Space. I'm afraid that this story just deserves to sink without trace.